Hi, my name is Mikita, and I'm a journalism student from Nottingham College. And today we have James Collis, yeah, from Liberal Democrat Party. Yeah.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. Can you introduce yourself a little bit? Tell us more about who you are.
Certainly. So I spent 25 years in the IT industry, working in different business sectors across the UK. And then about 10 years ago, I switched into environmental activism, which has led me to do a lot of work in the European Union on climate policy in particular. We started an organisation 5 years ago called Citizens Climate Europe, which has been helping regular citizens across Europe actively engage in politics since then. And last year I was delighted to be appointed to the European Union Climate Change Expert Group for the particular area that we're focused on. So that's a brief introduction to me.
Yeah, thank you. So you joined the Lib Dem party in 2018. And why did you make this decision, and what inspires you to do that?
It's interesting, I didn't even remember that it was 2018 that I joined in, so that's quite funny. Actually, I was interested in politics as a child. I used to collect political cartoons from the Sunday papers.
Oh, really?
In a big scrapbook. I had a father who was a conservative-leaning individual and a mother who was Labour-leaning, and I had always found my comfortable ground was more liberal. I think Paddy Ashdown, particularly in his leadership of the Liberal Party, I found very inspiring because it combined the political philosophy with dealing with the practical challenges of the voting system we have here. And once I joined, I found that spending time in Europe with people who were similarly minded was actually a lot of fun, talking about policies that would make a difference. So,
yeah. So, do you think age would affect the complexity of implementing all plans which you probably wanted to do when you joined the party?
I didn't really consider age as a criteria,
Yeah, of course,
particularly. I suppose I feel fortunate because I have benefited from the career I have, which has enabled me to switch into doing something that I feel passionate about rather than being continuously tied to having to earn an income. And that is a particular luxury. But in my experience on both the party side and the environmental side, age isn't a barrier to what you can accomplish. In fact, what I'm currently arguing for in the UK Liberal Democratic Party is actually the same policy has already been endorsed by the youth group of the UK Liberal Democrats and the Liberal Democrat youth group in Europe. So I don't see age as a barrier to political engagement and effective debate in this area.
Yeah, let's talk about elections a little bit.
Okay.
So for voters who are looking for change, Labour are clearly leading now the pack with a 96% chance of them winning in Broxtowe.
In Broxtowe, yeah.
So where are you standing?
It's a very good question. There are both party reasons and personal reasons for standing. I've been in environmental activism long enough to know that you don't get necessarily to the end result you want in one step. It takes time to build support, to build credibility, and to achieve what you really want. You're absolutely right to say that Labour are at this point highly likely to win the Broxtowe constituency, and particularly now as the right-leaning vote is being competed for by three separate parties, the chance of a credible opposition from the right getting through is really, really limited. So the local party goals here are to build support for the Liberal Democrats in the Broxtowe area, specifically targeting the more local elections that will happen in 2025. Their ambition there is to win a number of council seats and make themselves effectively the main opposition to Labour locally within a year, such that at future borough elections and a future general election, the Liberal Democrats will have the potential to compete effectively for the seat. What we see in the seats elsewhere in the country where the Liberal Democrats are able to compete from a position of second or even being the standing MP, is that support is built locally first. You have to build the local support, you have to build the credibility, you have to find people who support the ideas and the policies enough to support that work, and you build from there. So you're absolutely right, it's unlikely we will make a breakthrough. But there are some unusual characteristics around the Broxtowe seat, with the Labour candidate not being local. We're aware there's some tension between the candidate that the party has supplied and the local Labour Party. I don't imagine that will be enough to derail them from success. But what we hope from a party point of view is the almost certainty of it being a Labour government with a substantial majority. It actually frees people up to vote with their conscience for what they really want. And I'm sure somewhere in your questions there's something around the challenge of our current system, which forces people to make compromises in those decisions. So what we're really hoping for is a truer reflection of the actual support for Liberal Democrats in the Broxtowe area.
Yeah, there's also a thing, because according to YouGov and the Times survey results, support of Lib Dems among all different age groups is approximately around 10%.
Yes, it's fairly even across the age groups. It's quite unusual in that.
Yeah, it is, because like it's quite different with if you compare with any other parties. Because, for example, if you talk about Labour Party, there always was bigger support from young. Generation, and less support, lower support level from older generation. So how you be able to achieve this level of I don't know, consolidation?
How do we consolidate and grow our support?
Yeah, how you consolidate the young job?
That's a great question. So you're right that the demographics, particularly for the Conservatives and Labour, follow specific age group profiles. Actually, the characteristic that's most telling for Liberal Democrat supporters is more about their education level. And for me, my suspicion here is that this is partly down to the level of critical thinking an assessment of policy that's done by Liberal Democrat supporters. And it also explains why, when people come to vote, the statistics on their willingness to vote tactically is much higher for Liberal Democrats than it is for either of the two major parties. And I think there's a similarity here with the Greens as well. It's not unique to the Liberal Democrats. As a consequence of that, the real growth in the true level of support for Liberal Democrats or for Greens is only really going to be visible once we change to a voting system where all votes count, and the pressure to vote tactically or not to waste a vote, all of these terms will become irrelevant, because you will be able to vote directly for what you want and not what somebody else or you believe is the least worst option.
Yeah, in this case, in your opinion, how sufficient is today's level of youth involvement in politics?
Youth involvement?
Yeah.
How sufficient? Gosh. I have two experience bases for this. One is the environmental activism in Europe, and the other is with the Liberal Party. And actually, I think there is a general low level of interest in politics, partly because of a large level of disillusionment, which I think is not peculiar to just the UK, but is wider than that. But in the UK, I think that's exaggerated by the voting system that we have and the ability of our media to hold politicians to account. I think that's also a significant part here. And because the public don't see a direct correlation between their choice and who gets elected, and they don't see accountability for their actions, it absolutely leads fairly directly to a why should I bother? But I don't see that profile as distorted away from the youth, because in Europe, many of the countries, when we meet people in Brussels to go lobbying, there's a higher proportion of the youth are passionate about environmental issues. And for the different generation of people, I find this hugely motivating, that these young people want to come in, want to make a difference, and want to learn how to effectively exercise their democratic rights with politicians who are prepared to listen and consider what they want. And I see the same profile of engagement in the UK Liberal Party. So when I've met with the youth groups, I am thoroughly impressed with the quality of work they do and their passion for policy in the same way. But I'm not trying to pretend that that's universally true for all youth. But I guess what I'm saying is, I don't think it's a youth-related problem. I think it's a general problem. And if people are passionate and committed about issues, they will engage.
So what are the steps to solve the problem with low youth engagement in politics?
It would directly follow from that. For me, it would be a voting system that actually counts and records all votes in equal weight on shaping the government. Would be a significant step forward. I think both the party and I would like to see greater democratic tools used in the UK. So greater use of things like citizens' assemblies. The Liberal Democrats are strongly in favour of moving power and money from Westminster to regional and local governments. And that's broadly because it gets closer to the people and the issues, and the decisions made there are generally better and more cost effective. And that encourages democratic engagement by citizens with their local governance structures as well as the national model.
Also about election system.
Yep.
Labour Party mentions and they planning to change the age of voting. So what is your stance on changing the voting age? Should it be raised, lowered, or?
So Liberal policy on this is quite straightforward. We would absolutely lower the voting age to 16. We're also very keen to remove all voter suppression from the current system. So the obvious examples recently introduced were voter ID, which largely had a greater impact on suppressing the youth vote. And you could see why that would favour a Conservative Party with an older demographic in its voting base. So we would change it for lower. We would remove the voter ID constraints. And of course, we did have proportional representation, for instance, for police and crime commissioners and for regional mayors. And that was removed just prior to these elections. And the truth is that will absolutely have had a material impact on Liberal Democrat success, because broadly the main parties are more inclined to compromise and move to a Liberal perspective, and that be more comfortable than moving to the polarised alternative view.
So the last question will be, what advice would you give to young generation and young people who wants to enter the politics, but they don't know where to start?
Okay, that's a gorgeous question. Clearly, our current political system, as with many, has all sorts of challenges in terms of how effective it is for running the country at the moment. My suggestion would be to work out in your heart of hearts what subject is most important to you. Find an organisation that is active in that area and go and start working with them. That will help you understand what the political issues and opportunities are that would advance that particular cause, and it opens a door for you then to become involved in that, but it at least then is linked to something that you care passionately about, and you can be much more effective when it's a subject that you know, you understand and you care about to motivate that process than doing it for its own sake. So that would be, I would say, stick close to your heart, do what matters to you, and follow your interests.
Yeah, beautiful words. So thank you so much for coming today.
You're welcome.
Yeah, and I hope we see you again sometime.
Yeah, me too. Nice to meet you.
Thank you.